Statistically, a woman is more likely to be raped here than learn to read. Dumisani Rebombo was 15 when he and 2 others gang raped a female pupil at school. A shy boy at the time, Dumisani says he gave in to relentless peer pressure.
These guys have a request and they're thinking you should prove yourself to be a boy just like us. About this girl who thinks she's clever than any other girl in this village because she wouldn't want to date any of them. So, as these boys of the neighborhood, we decided to teach her a lesson. And the lesson is that she would be raped by some of us.
20 years later, Dumisani met his victim and apologized. All she did was cry, he says. Today, he's a gender relations counsellor, running educational workshops, trying to bridge South Africa's gaping sexual divide.
Men are not all monsters, actually, and it's wrong to even go around with the message that way. In fact, in South Africa, we're told that out of 6, only 1 is bad, but the 5 are silent. So if we try and get the 5 to speak up, the better.
Why is rape so rife? Well, causal factors include a history of violence and societal decay thanks to 50 years of apartheid. But there's also poverty, alcohol abuse and inadequate policing. Police figures show a sexual offence is committed every 8 minutes in South Africa. Yet campaign groups say just 1 in 9 attacks are actually reported to the police. That's because 9 out of 10 accused men walk free.
Somebody attacks you and rape you will not change who you are.
In a culture of such impunity, there are only small signs that Dumisani and others are making a difference.
And those men that are doing those things, that the man, for me, that is somebody that is already dead while he's alive.
People need to understand that this thing exists. People need to practice their rights, so we need to talk a lot more.
Beyond the workshop environment here in a township church, out on the streets, the silence still speaks louder than talk of human rights. Jonah Hull, AlJazeera, Johannesburg.
Another very powerful report out of South Africa. 2 German journalists have been released from prison in Iran after being charged with spying. Marcus Helvig and Jens Koh were sentenced to 20 months in prison for interviewing the son and lawyer of a woman condemned to die by stoning. But Iran's Revolution Court dismissed the sentences, instead slapping each with a $50,000 fine. And Egyptian officials have confirmed 2 Iranian naval ships will sail through the Suez Canal on Sunday. Israel's Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman had earlier said that he would consider this a provocation. This will be the first time Iran's naval vessels are using the canal since the Islamic Revolution in 1979. The world's biggest economies have reached a deal on how to track imbalances in the global economy. The issue has been blamed for making the 2008 financial crisis much worse than it might have been. China was initially reluctant but came on board in the end. From the G20 finance ministers meeting in Paris, Jackie Rowland reports.
Putting on a show of unity. The smiles of the family photo can't paper over the divisions within the G20. The world's leading financial powers agree that there are imbalances in the global economy, but it's much harder to agree on how to measure them. The sticking point was China. It didn't want its massive foreign currency reserves to be used as an indicator, but G20 members were able to reach a compromise.
This is a very complicated undertaking, and we need to be very careful to make sure we create a level playing field across countries, so that financial activity does not migrate to jurisdictions where standards are weaker or less vigorously enforced.
Ministers have also been focusing on commodity prices and food prices in particular. They want to find ways to protect the poorest countries against big price swings.
We have had a major convergence of views between different countries, developing countries and emerging countries, industrialized countries, to say that we had to go much farther in transparency, in the identification of stocks, in the use of agricultural land to respond to the need of population for food.
The financial crisis of 2008 was a global phenomenon, and ministers recognise that they'll need to take a global approach if another meltdown is to be avoided. The French hosts of this meeting have warned countries that they'll need to put self-interest to one side if the whole of the G20 is to achieve strong, sustainable growth. The long haggling over indicators raises a bigger question. If the members of the G20 found it so hard to agree on how to measure global imbalances, will they ever reach agreement on how to tackle those problems? Jackie Rowland, Al Jazeera, Paris.
Unions and leaders in Colombia have reached an agreement ending a 2-week-long transport strike. The government has agreed to cancel plans to cut the amount truck drivers are paid for hauling cargo. Thousands of drivers and their families had been blocking roads in the capital, Bogota, crippling parts of the city. Oil from BP's massive spill in April remains stuck at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. That's according to a top US scientist. Samantha Joy of the University of Georgia says the oil has not degraded and that life along parts of the sea floor has been decimated. Joy conducted her research through submarine dives around the spill site. Her findings appear to contradict claims by BP that the region would fully recover by next year. Hundreds of people have been gathering in the neighborhood of Ipanema in Rio de Janeiro. It's part of the lead up to Brazil's Carnival. One of Ipanema's most famous bands holds a street party every year ahead of the 4-day event to give residents a taste of what's to come. Carnival officially starts on the 5th of March. And in China, local police have been setting a good example. They've pitched in to give emergency medical aid to 3 adult dolphins in the Shandong province. And they help to administer fluids as well. And we're told the dolphins will be well within a week. This is Al Jazeera, and these are the stories making the headlines. Anti-government protests in Libya are widening. Witnesses are talking about a massacre by security forces in the city of Benghazi. A doctor there has told Al Jazeera that she's seen over 50 dead in the hospital she works in, amongst them an 8-year-old boy who died from a gunshot wound to the head. And in the city of Baida, east of Benghazi, foreign mercenaries have been seen on the streets. Witnesses have told us that they're shooting live ammunition at demonstrators.
It is a massacre in the full sense of the word. All kinds of weapons are being used against the civilian population. They are firing at people indiscriminately, using civilian cars without license plates to roam the streets and shoot at the people. There are dozens, maybe even hundreds of people who have been killed today. Yesterday, I was at the Jala hospital to look at the dead bodies and found that most of those killed were shot to the head and chest and in the eyes. It feels like an open war zone between protesters and the security forces. And there are mercenaries wearing yellow construction helmets who are attacking people from inside their homes.
Opposition groups in Bahrain are expected to set out their demands to the Crown Prince. Thousands of anti-government protesters have gathered once again at Pearl Roundabout. It's become the centre of anti-regime